When my wife and I got married, we decided that we were not going to own a television. Yes, we were one of those couples. Early 20s and ready to make the kinds of lifestyle choices that went against the norms of society. We weren't obnoxious about the fact, but we did take a measure of pride in the fact that we weren't wasting our time spent in front of a screen like so many of our friends. However, after 3 years of watching movies huddled around my tiny laptop and trying to find that impossible position in which we were both comfortable and we could still see the screen, we gave in. So on Halloween night, believe me, I know how cheesy that sounds at the beginning of a story like this, but that was actually the night, we went to the store and bought a flat screen like all of our other married friends. There we picked up a PS3 because we hadn't given in to watching television yet. We just wanted to be able to comfortably watch movies and play a few games. I had instant buyer's remorse as I watched our bank account shrink. But my wife was happy, so I loaded the boxes into the car and we headed home. When we set the screen at the foot of our bed for the next month, we rented movies and I beat my first video game since middle school. My remorse slowly lessened and I began to feel that we had made a worthwhile addition to our home. Sometime in early December, my wife's brother asked us if we had ever watched a show by the name of Adventure Time. I said no and asked what it was. He told me that it was the most amazing cartoon series and that he had ever seen, and that he had seen every episode. He offered to torrent every series for us, and I said sure. The next day, he brought over a flash drive and transferred the show to our PS3 hard drive. Then we did what everybody else does when they get a complete TV series. We binged-watched the whole thing in just a few days. It was seductively easy to watch an entire season in a single day, especially since each episode was only about 11 minutes long. Although the first episode seemed strange and a bit pointless, by the fourth episode we were addicted. By the time we got to the fourth season, the randomness of early episodes had transformed into coherent narrative arcs that could span multiple episodes, and the continuity meant that certain plot elements could often reappear a dozen episodes later. Cryptic hints of an elaborately tragic history within the show, a quote-unquote Great Mushroom War, is frequently mentioned, which made us pay more attention to even the slightest references and passing remarks made by the characters. The schizophrenic nature of the show's characters in the early episodes gradually disappeared, and the greater character development allowed us to connect with, and at times even sympathize with each figure. Some episodes were even able to strike genuine emotional notes, though they always quickly retreated back to the lighthearted and brightly animated essence of the show. For those of you who have not watched the show, I feel I should give a brief explanation. Adventure Time is a cartoon that follows the adventures of Finn the human and Jake the dog in the colorful land of Ooh. Finn is the last remaining human on Earth and is determined to be a great hero. Jake has magical powers and is there to protect Finn on his adventures. Their adventures usually center around rescuing one of the many princesses in Ooh. Dozens of races inhabit Ooh. The Candy People of the Candy Kingdom would be one example. And each has their own princess. Princess Bubblegum in the case of the Candy People. The primary cause of trouble in the land of Ooh is the kidnapping of princesses by the lonely Ice King. More misunderstood than actually evil, the Ice King desperately wants to marry a princess, and Finn and Jake regularly have to invade his ice fortress on rescue missions. However, they rarely have any hard feelings between them, and several photos of the Ice King even begs the heroes to be friends to hang out with. When not battling the Ice King, Finn and Jake play video games, fight monsters, and travel Ooh looking for anyone who needs help. In many ways, the show is a cross between Calvin and Hobbes and Where the Wild Things Are. Needless to say, my wife and I loved the show, and soon we arrived at the final episode on our hard drive, the season 4 finale. I had talked to my brother-in-law earlier that day and told him that we were almost at the end of our last season. He got really excited and told me that the last episode was entitled The Lich, and that it was a cliffhanger that carried on to the first episode of Season 5. I was pretty excited myself when I got off the phone and hurried home that night to watch our final few episodes. It was then after midnight by the time we reached the last remaining file on our PS3 hard drive, but there was no way we were going to sleep. I quickly selected the file. However, when I highlighted the final episode, it read, "It's not my fault." That was strange, I thought. Every other episode has been properly titled and placed perfectly. It seemed odd that the last one would be the only one mislabeled. I scrolled back through the previous episode, now afraid of somehow an episode had gotten out of order and that we didn't actually have the season finale. I even did a quick internet search to see if perhaps this was an alternate title for the finale. "It's Not My Fault" did not appear in any of the episode list I could find, and we were left with no other option but to just watch the anonymous episode and try and find the finale later. As I clicked on the file, I noticed that instead of being a usual 11-minute episode, the menu showed as being a full 30 minutes long. I assumed that this was either wasted space or perhaps whoever had created the torrent had included whatever cartoon came on after Adventure Time. I don't think my wife noticed the time difference, and I didn't feel any need to point it out. The familiar opening sequence and catchy theme song played, just like every other episode, and I shrugged my shoulders. Nothing seemed completely out of the ordinary. The show opened with Finn chasing Jake around their treehouse. Jake had found Finn's diary and was threatening to read it out loud. Finn screams that he had better give it back. After destroying several rooms, Jake suddenly stops and calmly hands the book over to Finn. Finn is surprised and asked why he gave it up so easily. Jake says that he was never really going to read the diary because he respects Finn's peebiz too much, and that everyone, especially heroes, deserve some privacy. "Besides," said Jake, "I already know what's in there. A bunch of mushy stuff about Princess Bubblegum." Jake then transforms himself into the shape of Princess Bubblegum and begins making kissing noises. Several penguins are walking by the window at that moment and spot Princess Bubblegum/Jake. They break through the wall and excitedly begin to carry Jake away. Finn chases them with his sword drawn. Jake escapes by transforming himself into a giant dog and barking ferociously at them. All of the penguins scatter in terror except for one, who Jake is able to catch with his lasso hand. Finn points a sword at the penguin and demands to know why they were trying to kidnap his best friend. The penguin refuses to answer. Jake realizes that they only wanted him because they thought he was a princess, and Finn asked if the Ice King is kidnapping princesses again. The penguin glances around nervously before nodding his head. Finn tells Jake that they have to rescue the princesses and asks what time it is. "Adventure time," says Jake. The next scene shows Finn and Jake leaping through the window of the Ice King's fortress. The Ice King is surrounded by his army of penguins, and is facing a giant cage and laughing. The cage holds every princess in the land of Ooh, with the exception of Princess Bubblegum. Finn demands that the Ice King surrender and release the princesses. The Ice King continues laughing and tells Finn and Jake that they can't stop him this time. 5 giant penguins suddenly appear and grab Finn and Jake. As the heroes struggle against the penguins, the Ice King begins to explain his plans.
"You know I've always wanted to marry a princess,"
he begins.
"Well, tonight I shall have my wish. As you can see, I've captured every princess in the land except one. We all know that Princess Bubblegum is a lady of her word, and that's why she's not here. Even I speak, one of my penguins is delivering her a message. Either she agrees to marry me, or I will kill the other princesses. You and I both know what choice she'll make. She's just too noble."
The Ice King laughs again and flips a switch to the wall. The room begins to shake. The floor to the cage slowly begins to retract, revealing a deep pit full of ice spikes. Jake begins to panic and tells Finn that the Ice King might be right, and that Princess Bubblegum might actually marry him. Now empowered by the fury of a jealous lover, Finn explodes into a rage of violence. Unleashing a mighty crackling scream, he punches free from the giant penguin guards and launches himself into the Ice King as Jake flips the switch, stopping the floor. With the flying kick to the face, Finn knocks the Ice King to the ground and draws his sword. The princesses cheer, and the defeated Ice King begins whining in disappointment. At this point, we were around 11 minutes into the episode, and I assumed that Finn would just give the Ice King his usual speech about how it was wrong to kidnap people, and then the episode would end. I was wrong. Instead of calming down, now that the vanquished Ice King lay at his feet, Finn continued to shake in anger. He began to scream and raise his sword above his head. The Ice King is surprised and asks Finn what was going on.
"You won!"
admitted the Ice King. "You can take the princesses and go!"
no.
Finn says. Everyone in the room goes silent and stares at the lifted blade. As a hero, it is my duty to fight evil, and this is the last time you will ever kidnap someone again, shrieks Finn, and in one disturbing quick motion, Finn brings the sword down upon the Ice King's neck, severing his head completely. I glanced at my wife. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. On the screen I could see the blood gushing from the body and the head. It had a surreal quality, almost as if the animators had actually used a mixed media technique. The blood didn't appear to be drawn, but rather it was like somebody was pouring actual liquid into the image. A hint of steam even rose from the ice floor as the hot blood poured upon it. The caged princesses were now screaming uncontrollably. Jake had wrapped his arms around himself, his face frozen in a silent scream. Finn, slowly coming to his senses, stares at the Ice King's decapitated corpse with vacant eyes and begins to mutter apologies. I didn't mean to act. I mean, it was an accident. It's not my fault, said Finn, his eyes filling with tears. This is your fault. Dr. Princess had moved to the front of the cage and was now looking directly at Finn. You had already defeated him. You didn't have to do this. But, I'm a hero, cries Finn. It was an accident. No, Finn, says Dr. Princess. You've done something very, very serious. The Ice King is dead, and it's all your fault. It's not my fault, screamed Finn. He wound up jumping out of the window and ran off in the snow. Princess Bubblegum and Lady Radicorn arrive, and Jake tells them about what had happened. They free the rest of the princesses and leave to search for Finn. The princesses return to their kingdoms, but they have seen too much. The next scene shows Finn hiding inside of a snow fort. He's trying to process what he had done. He reminds himself that he is a true hero and that everything he has done was only for the good of others. He says that he might not have meant to kill the Ice King, but it only happened because he was trying to do the right thing, trying to protect the princesses. His thoughts are interrupted when one of the penguins discover him. It's Gunther, the Ice King's favorite penguin. Gunther begins honking loudly to alert the others. Finn grabs the penguin and puts his hand over its mouth, but Gunther bites him. Finn draws his sword and points it menacingly at Gunther, telling him to be quiet. Gunther stops honking and begins to accuse Finn with gestures and squeaks. Finn screams that he's not a murderer. Gunther continues to blame Finn, slowly moving towards him and placing his flipper until he has backed Finn into a corner. Then he jumps at Finn's chest and slaps him across the face. Something inside of Finn snaps, and with a sense of righteous anger, he throws Gunther off and screams at the top of his lungs, "It's not my fault!" In another sickeningly fluid motion, Finn arcs his sword and slices Gunther completely in half. Again, the vivid blood begins to pour from the body. I can now see for certain that the animators had somehow incorporated an actual blood-like substance into their animation. Not only did the blood form a puddle around the body, but it actually began to run down the sides of the frame, down to the bottom of the screen where it began to pool, almost as if the screen itself was bleeding. Even when the angle changed, the blood running down and the screen remained. Now, through a slight reddish tint, I could see Finn, with Gunther's accusing cries now silenced. Finn realized a solution to his dilemma. He must kill everyone who witnessed his crime. For the next several minutes, a gruesome montage plays out across the screen, beginning with Dr. Princess. Finn proceeds to brutally murder every princess in an attempt to erase his crime. In every kingdom across the land of Oo, the same scene plays out, without a word. Finn approaches a princess, swings his sword, and splits more realistic blood across the screen. By the end of the montage, I could hardly even see the characters through the red streaks. After getting rid of the princesses, Finn realizes that there's only one witness left. Jake. He travels to the Candy Kingdom and confronts Jake in front of Princess Bubblegum. Jake transforms into a giant dog with a sword hand and fights with Finn. Finn demands to know whether Jake thinks it was all just an accident or if he too considers Finn a murderer. Jake says that he knows Finn. He knows that he would do anything to help anyone, that he has a true spirit of a hero, but that this time he went too far, and even that a hero should be willing to face up to their consequences. Finn drops his sword and bows his head. He begins to cry. Jake shrinks down and begins to hug him. Suddenly Jake screams. Finn's sword is buried deep in his stomach. I'm so sorry, said Finn. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. As Jake lay dying, Finn looked up and saw Princess Bubblegum staring at the scene in horror. The pink had drained from her face. Finn, still holding his bloodied sword, begins to walk towards her. Only one witness remains. Princess Bubblegum falls back and raises her arms to defend herself as Finn continues forward. She begins to sob and Finn pauses above her. I'm sorry. He raises his sword. This is all my fault. Then the screen went black. I looked around, and I was now standing across the room from our TV. I looked behind me. The image on the screen showed the main menu as the last 5 seconds of the episode continuously looped, yet the sobs continued. I looked down at my feet and saw my wife crumpled on the floor. In my hand was a knife from the kitchen. Please don't hurt me, begged my wife. Coming fully to my senses, I dropped the blade and sat on the floor next to her. She screamed and I tried to hold her, but she desperately pushed away and began to cry harder. Realizing that I had almost done something horrible, I begged her to come back to me. It's not my fault, I said. My wife erased the files on the hard drive in the morning. She said she never wanted to watch that show again. When I asked her what she had seen, she said that the episode had ended after 11 minutes like all the others, and that as soon as it had ended, I had slipped into some kind of trance. She said that she had no idea what I was talking about when I described the rest of the episode to her, and discussing it only made her cry. I begged my brother-in-law to show me where he had downloaded the files from, but he couldn't remember. Now you may be wondering why I'm choosing to share this story. It's quite simple. Nobody believes me when I tell them what I saw. They all believe that it was my fault, that I had really tried to hurt my wife. So now I'm sharing this in hopes that one of you, through morbid curiosity perhaps, will look through the same torrent that I was given. Maybe you'll find it and be tempted to watch the last file. Maybe you'll see the same thing that I did. And as I wait for that fatal curiosity to overtake someone, I'll keep one eye on the news, just hoping that someday there'll be a story about someone who killed their family and blamed it on a cartoon they watched. Then I'll know. Then everybody else will know that it really wasn't my fault. And that, my little shadows, was Adventure Time, It's Not My Fault. An Adventure Time Lost Episode Creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? To be honest with all of you, I remember when I had first read this about 2 years back. In fact, I think even earlier than that. And I actually found the story to be really enjoyable. And to be completely and utterly honest, even now, as I read this story, as I read the story, I actually can full on say that this was a very well made creepypasta. But like with every video on this channel, I'm gonna start reading the comments. Another one says, Daddy Mudahar read this to me. Wait, he did? I don't remember him reading this. Another one says, I can live with it. It's a pretty decent story with a nice twist. Gasp. Oh my glob. It's terrible and Finn has gone psycho. XD. Wait, let me redo that. Oh my glob. It's terrible. Finn has gone psycho. XD. It's very long, I know. I was attempting to fix the story's paragraphs. That's basically all the comments there. So, like with how we start these entire things off, let's start off with the very startup of the story. The very beginning of it actually has a really good startup and a good hook to it. Specifically with the mentioning of the protagonist and their wife not ever wanting, deciding ultimately to not sit there and watch a whole lot of television. Which, in retrospect, I can certainly understand. I mean, if you really think about it, television, in some manners, in some ways, is a bit of a ripoff. I mean, taking consideration, cable boxes and things of that nature, honestly, those kind of things cost way too much. For a whole year, it's $40 a month, and then it becomes $60 or $70 a month. That's just completely and utterly ridiculous. And to be completely honest and everything, especially with the rise of social media, YouTube, and other things, people really just aren't watching TV anymore. Or if they are, it's because there's a specific show that they watch that YouTube or whatever doesn't show. I mean, even I have a TV that I barely ever watch, and the only thing that I have is like a little antenna that gets a couple of channels, but that's about it. I mean, it's kind of funny how televisions more or less have went from being, extremely popular to basically practically obsolete at this point. And I can guarantee you, if it wasn't for the fact that, 3D televisions, HD, and all those other kind of things, and really ridiculous thin flat screen televisions were made, I guarantee you televisions would have immediately become obsolete or not as commonly used, like VHS tapes and things of that nature. I mean, but with all due sincerity, it's still pretty interesting, though. But what does any of this have to do with the review? Well, a good bit, because it's interesting that, this is basically like a different kind of couple wanting to sit there and not waste their time in front of a stupid TV, which, again, I agree with. Granted, we've replaced those with phones and things like that, but still, I mean, not wanting to waste time, watching TV and things like that, and actually getting stuff done is actually rather well, maybe not so much impressive, but definitely is a relatively good step in the right direction. That is, however, until the protagonist says that after 3 years of watching movies huddled around a tiny laptop, then basically when they finally wind up giving in, which in retrospect I can kind of understand. Mostly along the lines of the fact that, I mean, that's kind of the same case with me personally, because I have a TV in my house that, even though I don't watch really that much or really at all, I still have it connected up to an antenna and everything just to kind of make sure of it that, just to kind of pretty much make sure of it that if anything crazy happens, I have at least a news or something to watch, or the Weather Channel or something. So there's that. And the description in there, but the thing is though, what I was originally trying to get at is that the startup of the creepypasta itself actually worked pretty well. The storyline is pretty, the hook is actually pretty top notch, and it's actually something that is rather believable. It's something that people often do. And then, we finally get to the second paragraph where basically where we get to the part where the protagonist proceeds to describe about them buying a PS3 and buying a PS3 and also buying a flat screen television to put into their house because, well, again, they were sick and tired of watching DVDs and the like on a small little tiny laptop. Again, understandable. Very much understandable. And then later on throughout the story, and this is actually something I have to say, the flow within this creepypasta is very good. I mean, it doesn't automatically go into the crazy, insane kind of moments just right then and there. It actually provides a good storyline to the whole thing that actually makes it, not only a lot more believable, but something that, provides like two separate stories more or less in the actual creepypasta itself. One describing the protagonist and what they do and the storyline behind how and why they wind up coming across the whole thing, and the actual episode part, which I will be making a mention of later. Now, but of course, it ultimately goes to the part where the brother or something makes a mention of Adventure Time. The guy goes and pirates, which I do not recommend anybody do because you can get in some serious legal trouble if you do that. Just thought I'd sit there and give a bit of a disclaimer on that. Don't ever pirate crap, because you can get in a lot of trouble. But, specifically, the whole thing with the protagonist's brother giving them a USB drive with all the episodes, putting in them a hard drive, and then ultimately getting into the actual main episode itself. After a very good explanation about the actual show's concept itself, which again, is beautifully well done, and is actually a really good summary. Especially given the fact that it's literally only one full paragraph, but that one full paragraph that fully explains everything, which again is another huge positive for me because it manages to shorten it down enough where it's not too long, but also be long enough that it's a proper summary. Of course, it ultimately goes to the whole family, to the two people, well, the protagonist and his wife pretty much watching the entire series up until around the end. And this is where the entire creepypasta just gets even better. And that's the description of the actual Cree episode itself. Now, I know some people are going to call out, the realistic blood cliche, which, again, I will admit, is a cliche, but it actually incorporated it very well into this Lost episode story. And it's not overused. Well, I mean, it is used, but it's not so overused that it's, jokeable or laughable or whatever. Wow, I cannot talk today. I apologize for that, people. You know, there is that cliche in it, but getting back to this specific paragraph, everything within the actual episode itself is, again, very believable. With Finn and Jake basically doing a bunch of other weird stuff and having a diary, and then, the Ice King the Penguins kidnapping Jake because he looks like a princess, and then Gunner pretty much ratting out the Ice King and everything, telling them that, the Ice King's taking princesses again. And this is actually something I'm going to be 100% honest about here, is the motivation, and this is kind of where I understand the reasonings of the princesses and everything, especially what Dr. Princess wound up saying after Finn, pretty much eliminated the Ice King in a rather graphic manner. For the most part, when I think about it, I actually do agree with both sides of the matter. For example, what Finn ultimately did. I mean, thinking about it, in that kind of situation, what would you have personally done? I mean, think of it. The Ice King continuously kidnaps princesses over and over and over and over again. Now, granted, I'm not saying I have anything against the Ice King. I'm just trying to use this as an example, and hopefully as some form of possible sympathy and understanding on Finn's part for anybody who probably doesn't think on that matter. But in retrospect, really, I mean, but think of it though. Finn and Jake throughout the series have had to sit there and completely and utterly save the princesses over and over and over and over again from Ice King, pretty much from the Ice King kidnapping them all the time. Now, in this manner, this is where the Ice King pretty much goes too far, by sitting there and even threatening to kill all the princesses by dropping them into a large thing of ice spikes, if, Princess Bubblegum doesn't sit there and marry them. Well, if Princess Bubblegum doesn't marry him. Now, think of that for a bit, and think of it a little bit in Finn's point of view on that. That right there alone, spouted out a justifiable spout of anger. And of course, it's ultimately what wound up leading Finn to do the thing that he did to the Ice King at the end. And do I think that what he did was justified? Well, to be completely and utterly honest, thinking on it, even if Finn did defeat the Ice King and, let him go, he's still going to keep on doing it. And who's to say that he wouldn't have done something a lot worse? I mean, granted, I know I'm probably looking into it a little bit too much, perhaps, but really take in consideration in that kind of manner. Especially, now, I'm not saying that it's justifiable to sit there and do that unless it's through self-defense, but again, it's understandable why Finn would sit there and do that. Because ultimately, in the end, even as he himself said it in the creepypasta, he only wanted to defend the princesses. He wanted to sit there and end the Ice King's continuous tirade. And who's to say that he might have actually, did a lot more good than anything? It's kind of where it's a bit of a justifiable or a necessary evil in a sense. And granted, yes, two wrongs don't make a right, but in this manner, though, I think that kind of cancels it out a bit. Now, the reactions of the princesses is also where I get to the point where I also understand their perspective as well. Because of the fact of the matter that, the Ice King at the time wasn't really doing anything to Finn to really warrant him getting his head cut off. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I like Simon, I do. I like the Ice King. I do. I think he's a great character. But, again, in retrospect, though, what Finn probably should have done was just do something in a manner or in a way to, just pretty much do something in a manner in a way that would really deter the Ice King from actually doing that ever again. But then again, he technically had already done that over and over and over again in literally each and every episode that has him kidnapping the princesses. And so, I mean, it would only seem, well, not normal, but it would only seem understandable why Finn, again, would sit there and react the way that he did and do the things that he did. But getting back to why I agree with the princesses, though, is that, like Dr. Princess herself even said, basically, she herself says that, and I quote, um, that you have done something very, very serious. The Ice King is dead, and it's all your fault. Well, actually says, no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. My apologies. You have already defeated him. You didn't have to do this. And she is correct on that one. And this is another thing I genuinely love about the Creepypasta, because this entire situation honestly helps and makes a person like myself, and probably many of you right now, think a little bit. And understanding, where the justification and everything is, the understanding of what both sides are actually saying on the matter, because both points, in a sense, are equally as valid in a manner, in a way. And, of course, getting back, it is understandable what the princesses are saying. I mean, what Finn did wasn't exactly the right thing to do. Because, he had already been defeated. He was practically defenseless at that point. But again, in Finn's defense, he was only doing it because he cared about the princesses and didn't want him sitting there and doing something a lot worse in the next time around. Who's to say what could have happened if Finn didn't act the way that he did to the Ice King? Again, not trying to justify anything, but again, it's a necessary kind of evil. It genuinely is. And I'm quite sure a lot of us would probably, I mean, and this could also be played out in real life. What would have been done if this or this wind up happening? Is it justifiable in one manner or one way to sit there and take a life if it means saving the lives of so many other people? Even if they haven't really done anything wrong, despite the fact that you know that they're going to do something wrong? It's a huge debate, more or less, on that end. But that's something I think, you guys could probably discuss in the comment section, although it's probably going to become a full-on war. But you know what? That's fine. Well, maybe no. Not really so much a war, but a civil discussion, more or less. What do you guys think about that? Do you think it's justified? Do you guys think it's not? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, getting back to the actual review itself, the detail and everything within each, scene is also very well done as well. It's also very well done because it actually gives a proper visualization of what's happening throughout this episode, which adds a lot more to it, in a really positive kind of manner. And of course, another thing as well I can also say that I genuinely liked about this, as the story continues on, Finn doesn't really go insane per se, but he's so riddled with guilt to the point where he kind of loses it a bit. Specifically with him wind up killing Gunther, and then afterwards going off to each and every princess that witnessed the thing, which, granted, I'm not 100% sure how he managed to sit there and do that, especially with Lumpy Space Princess, but, him sitting there and doing that. Then again, it was never really made a mention of how long it actually took, but still. And the idea of him doing all that to try and cover up what he did, again, is something that is very believable, and it's, especially in a real-life situation. It's really dark, but that's another thing I liked about this Creepypasta, was the fact that it had that dark concept to it. And while it still can actually be seen like an actual Adventure Time episode, it's still relatively different in a manner and in a way that's, darker, but, again, not anything out of the ordinary. And the ending part and everything where Finn sits there and acknowledges what he did, but still winds up offing, Princess Bubblegum and Jake in the process is, well, a pretty good conclusion. Now, to the very ending of this Creepypasta itself. Specifically with the protagonist snapping out of it or whatever, and apparently attempting to do something horrible, and then making a mention of it's not my fault. This is where I get a little bit confused on the matter. I mean, what exactly really triggered the whole thing? Because apparently, as the story itself says in the end, this supposed like the entire episode up until like the 11-minute part afterwards apparently supposedly didn't happen. At least not in the minds of everybody else that was there, including his wife. But it still played out in a manner in a way that's still, you know, very much believable. Well, very much like an actual Adventure Time episode. So it makes, it also kind of adds a little bit of a what in the world happened. Did the protagonist kind of zone out and just visualize the whole thing in his head? Was there some kind of hallucination that was going on? I mean, there definitely could have been something to kind of get a better explanation, more or less, about what exactly happened. Or maybe the wife could have, elaborated a little bit more on what happened. That way we'd get a better explanation about, well, again, what exactly happened throughout the whole thing. But I guess in that kind of manner, it's really up to our own decisions our own imagination and decisions to really kind of come up with what exactly happened throughout the actual episode itself, or what happened afterwards, or what happened between that. But ultimately, though, it ended off quite well with well, everyone will know that that it really wasn't my fault. I like that. I like the fact that it actually makes a mention of the title of it with "It's not my fault." Now, of course, it is a little bit overused at times, but it definitely is, necessary to a small extent. It provided a great ending to wrap everything up. So again, another major positive, but also, in a sense, somewhat of a negative as well with the story. But like I always say with these creepypastas, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be a 9.5 out of 10. It's a great creepypasta, very believable, very well done, and really makes you think. However, However, the lack of a proper explanation, about what exactly happened to the protagonist and things of that nature, and everybody just automatically assuming that, he did. Granted, technically he kind of did, but everybody apparently assuming the worst or something with him, and then the ending part where he makes a mention of I'm just waiting for somebody else to find this and do those horrible things. Which, why would you wait for that kind of thing? To be honest, why would you do that? And saying it's not my fault, which in retrospect ends it fine, but it still could have been revised just a little bit better to try and make sure that everything worked out. But overall, still a very good story, which is why it gets a 9.5. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm the Shadow Reader. Thanks again for watching today's episode, and if you're brand new here to this channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. And of course, like always, roll the outro because I'm out.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping, horror-driven, nightmarish, gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.